that caught his attention. He started looking around, wondering if it was a bear that scared them or what. And then that's when he said he saw to the south of him these two flying saucers approaching over the treetops. They approached, and one of them came right down and landed on the rock in a clearing 100 feet away or so. He didn't approach it right away. He would have been cautious, and he basically hid behind the rocks here and just watched it for a long time. And then he started kind of faintly hearing voices come from it, the craft, and so that was what kind of, I guess, overcame his caution, and he approached more closely, thinking that, you know, maybe there was people there. Whoa! Go.
This is the rock.
This is where the story begins, yeah. This part of it, anyway.
Okay. This is where he was sitting having his lunch. Right here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was May 20th, 1967, this encounter happened to a guy named Stefan Michalak. I believe that's how you pronounce his last name, Michalak. A guy of Polish origins who came to Canada after the Second World War and had a family in Winnipeg, and he had been previously in the military, but in Canada worked as a mechanic at a cement company in Winnipeg, and on his time off he was an amateur prospector, geologist, rock hound kind of guy. He would like to collect rock samples, and he had taken some prospecting courses in Canada, and on that particular weekend he took the bus to Falcon Lake the night before, and woke up early in the morning. The clerks at the hotel saw him leave with just his backpack on his back with his lunch and hammer and chisel and safety goggles and stuff. And it would have taken him quite a while to work his way out here. None of the trails we came in on existed anymore. So it was just, would have been bush and swamp the whole way from the Trans-Canada out here. And he was working on sampling rocks in the area throughout the morning, and then said he was sitting on these rocks right here to have his lunch. So it was midday, and that time of year is no leaves on the trees or anything. It's hard to say what it would have looked like really, because these trees are less than 50 years old, a lot of them. He said while he was sitting here, suddenly this flock of geese got startled off one of the ponds right here close by. You can see we're kind of surrounded by little ponds, and that caught his attention. He started looking around, wondering if it was a bear that scared them or what. And then that's when he said he saw to the south of him these two flying saucers approaching over the treetops. They approached, and one of them came right down and landed on the rock in a clearing 100 feet away or so, and the other one hovered above the trees for a minute or two, and then it flew off, he said.
Okay.
He didn't approach it right away. He would have been cautious, and he basically hid behind the rocks here and just watched it for a long time. And then he started kind of faintly hearing voices come from it, the craft, and so that was what kind of, I guess, overcame his caution, and he approached more closely, thinking that, maybe there was people there, or he could help them out in some way. And his famous "Come on out, Yankee boys" line was then he kind of called out in different languages. He knew Russian and German and Polish and English, obviously, and so he kind of tried these different greetings as he was walking up to the thing, but the voices sort of stopped, and he didn't see anyone when he got up to it. But so we can kind of approach by the path that he would have taken here and go out to the site itself.
So this is the spot right here.
So the map that he drew, kind of jumping ahead, he was homesick recovering from this. He drew a map for the RCMP and the Air Force investigators who were trying to find the site without him, and so he drew this little map. It sort of orients this way, but basically there's a little cliff here that he marked, the water out this way, and he said this UFO landed on the rock, basically where those shrubs are there, not down in the swamp, which is wet all the time. And the picture that he drew of the craft, if you want to take this, so this is kind of his original sketch, and he said it was quite large, 35 to 40 feet across and 10 or more feet high, so it would have sort of filled the whole end of the rock here. And he said when he walked out here, he could see this door was open in the side of it, and there was really bright light streaming out, kind of so bright you couldn't look directly at it. And he put down his tinted safety goggles that he had on to try to walk closer and see inside. And he said that he walked to the entrance and tried to look inside, but it was just too bright to see in. But he did describe the thickness of the walls as being almost 2 feet thick, and the surface of it was smooth without any rivets or anything like that. And then he touched the side of it with his glove while he was standing at the door, and it melted the fingers of his rubberized glove, which was later found here by the authorities. And then he said the door slid closed like almost the lens of a camera, and the whole craft rotated, and he was facing this vent or grate of some kind on the side, and then it suddenly blasted out this hot exhaust or some sort of substance that it hit him in the chest, this exhaust, and started his clothing on fire and burned through. He had a light shirt and a light jacket, burned this pattern of circles through that clothing into his stomach, and he had second-degree burns on his neck and chest where his shirt was open at the top. And that sort of knocked him back, and as he was peeling off these smoldering layers of clothing, he said the craft sort of tilted and took off into the air, and that was the last he saw of it. And basically from that point he was in pain, and he said he started to feel sick right away and was nauseous and had a severe headache, and he just sort of left his stuff strewn about here and tried to get back to the highway as quick as he could. And most days, like today, you can tell the highway is somewhere over there because you can hear it. And so he made his way back, and a police officer found him. The police report, I think, is on the next page, from the officer that found him at 3 o'clock that afternoon. So it took him roughly 2.5, 3 hours to get out of here, and kind of staggering along the highway, and told this story to the officer. He had kind of charred marks on his clothing, and at that point he was thinking in his mind that he must have been exposed to radiation, kind of explaining these symptoms that he had to himself. And so he kind of declined the officer's offer for a ride, and he just walked back to town. And he did ask for medical help, but there was no doctor or ambulance here at that time of year in those days. And so he just called his family and told them he had an accident and needed to be taken to the hospital when he got home that night, and then just sort of waited around outdoors of the hotel until his bus came that evening. And then his family took him to Misericordia Hospital, where they treated his burns and basically just sent him home with cream for his burns and painkillers. But then he got really sick at home and stayed home sick, basically in bed for 2 or 3 weeks or more, and lost a ton of weight. He couldn't eat. His son Stan said that in the book that he's written since then, and in various interviews and stuff, that this bizarre smell, like almost like burnt electrical wiring, sulfur type smell, was like coming from his dad's body, was like emitting this smell, and it was like the whole room would smell like it where he was, and that was bizarre. And different doctors checked him for radiation exposure and things over that period of time, and couldn't really find the cause of all this, and they took soil samples back with them, and that's when they discovered these high levels of radiation in the soil, which prompted more investigations, and Federal Department of Health kind of cordoned off the site, and they did a dig out here and eventually found these radioactive chunks of silver, like silver bar, that had been melted, and they had uranium mixed in with them as well, but it was basically like 99% pure silver, and they were melted down into the cracks in the rocks here. And Stan Michalak still has these pieces. He's brought them out for a couple different groups, and they're just, they're melted under high heat. They're full of all these little bubbles, and bizarrely shaped, sort of zigzag shaped, and the authorities at the time tried to kind of investigate the angle of, could someone have stolen this stuff and faked it, and they couldn't find any uranium missing from any of the uranium storage sites around the province or anything like that. So they, over the years, they had different, Michalak himself told his story hundreds of times, probably more than that, and never really embellished it in any way, and there was no evidence of any kind disproving his story. And all the interviewers and psychologists and stuff who looked at him just said he truly believed what he was saying, and just seemed to honestly want to tell this story to sort of warn other people not to approach these craft if they did see them. And so the RCMP and Air Force, and they all just have it kind of listed as an unexplained credible encounter. It's considered one of the best, or it is the best documented one, I believe, in Canada, just because of all the government reports and different RCMP, Air Force, and government departments that were involved. So there's hundreds of pages of these types of reports and documents in the Canadian archives related to this, apparently.
This piece of metal, did that come from the craft?
It came from here, and it was underground, like it was several inches down in this crack in the rock, so there was no evidence one way or the other. It was where the craft landed, no doubt about that, but they were never able to really determine its origin. It was a mystery.
Mm-hmm.